A hush falls over the arrival hall when the first humid breeze from the tarmac slips through glass doors. And the question that brought so many suitcases and so much hesitation, whether moving to Australia in 2025 is really worth it, hangs in the air like the scent of eucalyptus. The scene opens on faces that have read 1,000 blogs and watched a dozen vlogs, now learning to read a different rhythm. The measured smile at passport control. The small talk about weather that somehow skips the weather and lands on lifestyle. The way a packed tram slows and breathes as though time itself had softened. This is a place that greets newcomers with wide skies and an economy that hums in the background. And the first, most visible contrast is not policy or price, but tempo, an unforced pace that rewires expectations the moment a body steps out of the airport into sunlight. First impressions pivot on sensory registers. Streets smell of salt and cut grass. Shops play music at a volume that invites conversation rather than consumption. Many Americans notice the absence of certain urban rattles, fewer sirens at night, more people walking with purpose rather than with a perpetual rush. Social spaces feel less staged. A cafe table becomes a modest social institution rather than a performance stage. The language is the same, but the manner inflects it differently. A casual politeness threaded with blunt sincerity, compliments that are economical and often quieter than their American counterparts. Newcomers describe it as gentler. Locals, when asked, sometimes call it direct. Both descriptions point to the same horizon, a social choreography where leisure and labour share a less frantic lane. Beneath the sensory veneer are deeper cultural currents. Australians carry a pragmatic egalitarianism that surfaces in mundane rituals, the informal banter at the office. The way authority is tempered by humour, the expectation that public spaces will be used by everyone and for many purposes. Where Americans often valorise hustle and upward mobility as defining virtues, Australian daily life more visibly honours balance, outdoor time, and community entitlement to the commons. This does not mean stagnation. Rather, it shapes a different calculus of value. Work is important, competence is prized, but long weekends, public holidays, and time off are woven into the national fabric in ways that quietly alter long-term priorities. Those cultural differences extend into habits that newcomers rapidly catalogue. The normalised reliance on public healthcare and what it does to everyday risk calculations. The propensity for conversations to pivot from career milestones to weekend plans. The bluntness in critique that, paradoxically, avoids performative self-promotion. Typical interactions often involve an economy of words and gestures that rewards modesty and mutual respect more than theatrical ambition. Small rituals, removing shoes at certain homes, joining a barbecue without elaborate invitation, or trusting a stranger's advice about a suburban school accumulate into a lived confidence that reshapes decision-making. At this early stage, many see migration not as an escape, but as a recalibration. The elements that make Australia alluring are experiential, space that feels breathable, a social tempo that allows reflection, and a public life that often privileges communal access over spectacle. Yet beneath these attractions lie practical questions and emotional adjustments that will test assumptions formed elsewhere. And those questions begin to reveal themselves in daily inconveniences and subtle satisfactions alike. The practical realities of life in 2025 begin to surface as routines settle, revealing a landscape shaped by contrasts that are neither wholly comfortable nor wholly challenging. Housing becomes the first major reckoning. Many Americans observe that Australia's cities feel expansive yet expensive, where suburban meets property markets that stretch expectations. Renting demands patience. Buying requires calculation. Yet the tension softens in the presence of predictable infrastructure, clean public spaces, well-maintained transit, beaches treated as public goods rather than premium amenities. Even in dense districts, there is a visible intention to preserve quiet pockets of green. Subtle reminders that lifestyle here is curated not through luxury, but through accessibility. Work culture draws its own stark line of comparison. Offices move at a steadier cadence, and performance is judged with a blend of competence and camaraderie. Many newcomers note the rarity of overtime glorification. Staying late is often seen as inefficiency rather than dedication. Team rhythms favour collaboration without hierarchy, and leadership tends to be approachable rather than ceremonious. This climate often surprises Americans accustomed to sharper corporate ladders and more transactional networking norms. Here, relationships grow through shared humor, steady reliability, and an understated trust that feels earned rather than negotiated. Daily interactions form a mosaic of unspoken rules. Cashiers greet customers with relaxed informality. Strangers at bus stops hold small conversations without presumption. Even conflict has its own cultural script, direct, firm, but rarely escalated. Public life operates on a shared presumption of fairness, cues respected without contest, community spaces used with a quiet sense of collective ownership, and social expectations that reward humility over grand declarations. The tall poppy ethos, the tendency to gently level excessive self-importance, becomes apparent in workplace conversations and weekend gatherings alike. Shaping an atmosphere where achievement is recognized but seldom flaunted, nature acts as both backdrop and compass. Australians integrate the outdoors into routines without ceremony. Morning swims before work, evening walks along coastal paths, casual picnics that materialize whenever the weather allows. This environmental intimacy shifts emotional rhythms. Many Americans find their stress recalibrating as commutes pass through sunlit suburbs and lunch breaks unfold in parks rather than parking lots. The climate encourages spontaneity. The culture reinforces it. Weekends become invitations to disconnect from productivity narratives and reconnect with physical presence, a shift that gradually alters how newcomers interpret time, value, and ambition. Yet the beauty of this transformation is matched by complexities. Distance from family becomes more acute once the novelty fades. Time zone gaps stretch relationships into new shapes. Essentials can be pricier than expected, and adapting to new bureaucratic systems requires patience. Still, as these challenges settle into background noise, the broader question, whether moving to Australia is worth it, slowly reframes itself. It becomes less about opportunity in the abstract and more about how a society's values seep into everyday decisions, influencing what feels normal, sustainable, and satisfying. Public systems reinforce this worldview. Universal healthcare reduces everyday anxiety, quietly shaping long-term planning. Safety nets feel less conditional, allowing individuals to explore career changes without the same level of existential risk. Many Americans describe an unexpected emotional clarity that comes from living in a society where certain basics are not precarious. This steadiness doesn't eliminate stress, but redistributes it, offering a psychological spaciousness that recalibrates what people consider possible for themselves. Typical daily scenes illustrate this transformation. Parents gather in parks after school as children play freely. Co-workers linger at outdoor tables long after lunch is over. Commuters choose coastal paths over highways whenever weather permits. These rituals become signposts of a slower, more deliberate lifestyle. Even conflict reveals cultural texture. Whether negotiating a work deadline or navigating neighborhood disagreements, the tone tends to resist escalation. Instead, there is an underlying expectation of calm resolution, shaped by a collective habit of keeping tension measured and communication direct. As the months accumulate, the original question, whether the move is worth it, evolves into something more nuanced. The answer becomes inseparable from how each person responds to a society that balances ambition with restraint, individuality with communal norms, and opportunity with distance. Australia offers a form of stability that is experiential rather than idealized, rooted in predictable public systems and a social rhythm that encourages grounded living. For many Americans, this stability becomes the most transformative aspect of migration. Not the beaches or the weather, but the emotional architecture built by a culture that values moderation as much as aspiration. In the end, the worth of moving to Australia in 2025 is often measured not through dramatic changes, but through quiet ones, the steady morning routines, the softened evenings, the absence of urgency that once felt normal. The journey becomes a reflection on how environments shape identity, and how a society's collective habits can gently rewrite a person's understanding of what a fulfilling life should feel like.